Morning. I'm Corvallis Advocate Editor Stevie Biswanger, and co-moderating with me tonight is our publisher, Steve Schultz. Welcome to tonight's CitySpeak Forum. This evening, we'll focus on our environmental footprint, both globally and locally. We're going to look at the community's progress and how the pandemic shutdown has impacted sustainability efforts. Tune in next week for another CitySpeak Forum over the topic of public and self-health, mind and body, kind of health check-in, which will also start at 6:30. Again, that's next Tuesday night. So CitySpeak is presented by the Corvallis Advocate, which offers daily news online, and in non-pandemic times, a twice-monthly deep dive print publication, along with live forums and storytelling nights. CitySpeaks are co-presented by City Club of Corvallis, a volunteer-run nonprofit organization seeking to present a diversity of viewpoints and constructive dialogue. Steve?
Thank you, Stevie. You can support forums like these by donating or subscribing to the Corvallis Advocate. If you're not a subscriber, it's only $5 monthly for unlimited online access. You can purchase services over and above that, or donate over and above that, if you are so inclined. Along these lines, we want to, at the Advocate, thank the sponsors that make this evening possible. The First Alternative Natural Foods Co-op, Peak Sports, and the Corvallis Sustainability Coalition. If you're not a subscriber, think about it this way. You're about to consume content without helping the people who did the hard work to put this together. You wouldn't do that if you were ordering a pizza. Please do consider subscribing. Stevie.
Thank you. Without further ado, I would like to introduce this evening's panelists. Joining us tonight are Brandon Trelstad, the OSU Sustainability Officer, Scott Dybvad, the City of Corvallis Sustainability Coordinator, Sean McGuire, the Benton County Sustainability Coordinator, Bailey Payne, the Corvallis School District Sustainability Specialist, Trish Weber, a longtime climate activist and well-versed in what's going on with Jordan Cove. And we have Jillian Gregg, an OSU sustainability instructor with a background in crops, soil sciences, and climate change. Thank you all so much for taking the time out to be here tonight. And in a few moments, we're going to turn to audience questions. So to ask a question while we're live, viewers are welcome to comment on the event's live post on our Facebook page, the Corvallis Advocate, or email us at corvallisadvocate@cityspeak.com. Again, that's corvallisadvocate@cityspeak.com. For now, we're going to start with some introductory questions from our editorial board. And first, we're going to go to Brandon, who again is the OSU Sustainability Officer. Brandon, what's the scope of your work at OSU, and what kind of progress have you seen as far as sustainability efforts?
Yeah, well, first, thanks for having me, and this is going to be a great panel, I think. So the scope of my job at OSU and the work of the Sustainability Office really is to focus on carbon emissions reduction as our primary strategic goal. We have a lot of other things we do, but in the limited time I've got tonight, I'll just focus on that and then maybe answer some questions about some other work we do later. But I've been at OSU in this role since the fall of 2005. So believe it or not, I'm the longest serving of my counterparts in higher education in Oregon and Washington and most of California at this point. And a lot of our work, especially recently, has really been focused on building energy systems with a focus primarily and foremost on energy efficiency and conservation. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, but we've also, our shop manages the solar resources on campus. We've got 3 megawatts, that's 3 million watts of solar power in the ground and on roofs at OSU. And we have work that we dabble with in terms of water conservation, habitat restoration, and a few other things. And overlaying all of this are a few other principles in terms of primarily student engagement. So everything we do, we try and have some focus on student engagement. And when we do, we have learning outcomes and other things that support the academic enterprise. We partner with Jillian and folks in the sustainability double degree, along with a host of other academic programs on campus to give students real world experiential learning opportunities that supplement and enhance their classroom experience. So that's kind of where our focus is. We also, the other overlay that we've started implementing in the last couple of years is a real focus on social justice. So in everything we do, we try and consider what are the impacts on underrepresented groups. Are we investing money with contractors that uphold the principles and values, not just of OSU, but of our sustainability team? And again, focusing on that student engagement element as well. So there's lots of different layers to this, and sustainability, we may get into the definition of sustainability over the course of this evening, but it's imperative for us that it really is not, as it was 10, 20 years ago, primarily a focus on environmental systems, but it includes the social systems that are so much being exposed as vulnerable and fragile systems now during the course of this pandemic. So hopefully we'll touch on that a little bit later. But so that's sort of an overview of what we do and how we do it. Our progress over the last 10 years, I can sum up briefly in that we've been able to reduce carbon emissions by about 12% during a period of unprecedented growth. And for those who know the Corvallis campus and our other sites across the state, we actually have a physical presence in all 36 Oregon counties. We've experienced massive growth. And if you normalize for that growth in terms of per student enrolled and per square foot, we've actually been able to reduce carbon emissions by 41%. A couple of other numbers I'll throw out is that we're often ranked in the top 25 colleges and universities doing sustainability work nationally. And that's not just because of the work in my shop. Often we're the ones gathering information from other parts of the campus and entities all over the state to report to national entities that like to rank and rate colleges and universities for their sustainability work. So we're pulling in information and reporting it in ways that people want to see it. And that typically gets OSU in the top, we've been ranked as low as number 11 in the nation, but we typically float between 11 and 25 somewhere. So that's how our progress in a nutshell, just as a quick snapshot of where we are, again, with our primary strategic focus of reducing carbon emissions, but there's a lot more that we do. I'd love to talk about it, but want to get to the other panelists too.
Absolutely, thank you. Just one other question. Has the pandemic shutdown impacted the OSU footprint or sustainability efforts in any way?
Yeah, that's a great question. The answer to the first part of that question in terms of our sustainability or our carbon footprint and other sustainability metrics that we're looking at, we already know that we've saved, oh gosh, I just saw the June numbers today. We've saved about $750,000 in utility expenses because of specific actions OSU has taken to reduce primarily natural gas and electricity use in buildings, and to some degree water use as well. Now, it's easy to do that when our buildings are, maybe 10 or 20% full or less, as we experienced in April. People are slowly coming back to campus, but we're far from fully active now. And so we've really taken advantage of the opportunity to figure out how we can really streamline systems. And for one quick and easy example is to let temperatures float. If we only have a couple people in a building, or if the building is truly unoccupied, we don't need to heat or cool it within the same comfort range that people are used to. We're going to let those temperatures float with the weather a little bit. And in that, we see tremendous savings. We don't know the impact on our carbon footprint until our report will be released in the fall. As we do every year, we report on no joke, hundreds of different sustainability metrics through a comprehensive assessment system we do every year. So I can't answer it numerically other than in the dollar savings that we're reporting up to our leadership and trying to really push the envelope towards savings, because that means carbon footprint reduction. It means fewer people laid off, which is the reality that we're looking at OSU because of financial impacts from the pandemic. So I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, great. Thank you. We're going to move to Scott, who is, again, the City of Corvallis Sustainability Coordinator. Scott, what is the scope of your work for the city, and if you've seen any progress with sustainability goals, given that the annual report was just released?
Yeah, we just released that last week or the week before for our 2019 calendar year. And I guess I should go back and say that my position focuses more on internal sustainability rather than the community side of sustainability. Our climate action plan really has two separate parts, an operational part and a community part. And so that operational part is my to-do list. The community part falls under the Climate Action Advisory Board, CAB, who advises City Council. But so the scope, being that the scope of my work is internal, we have, in 2011, we established 5 goal areas to measure and track our sustainability progress internally. And those are water, I should say sustainable facilities, which includes water and energy, sustainable purchasing, which is data basically from our greenhouse gas inventory. We look at our vehicle carbon footprint. So how much fuel do we use for our passenger vehicles, the pickup trucks we take around town, the transit buses that are around town every day. Waste reduction is another area that we look at. And finally, kind of a sustainability on the social side, we look at an employee engagement area, which we track. For this, we track safety and participation in a voluntary kind of employee wellness program that happens in the springtime, and also turnover. So there's a variety of methods that we kind of track, or areas that we track within those 5 goal areas. And so that annual report that I do, it just came out. It's that kind of celebrates or talks about ways that we're trying to celebrate our accomplishments and addresses ways that we're trying to improve areas that aren't moving so great. So areas like water, we've had some significant progress. Just in the last year, 2019 compared to 2018, we reduced 1 million gallons. And right now we're at about 70 million gallons per year, less than we were during our peak year of 2008. That's per year, 70 million gallons. It's almost hard to imagine where that water was being used now that we've got new practices and methods, and you get used to the efficiency that you create, adapt to. An area where we're having a little bit more trouble is, and this area touches a little on the public side, because we track waste that we generate from our own operations, but we also track the waste that we collect from public sites like parks, the library, and illegal camp cleanups. And that area of trash, I've got the numbers right here. Overall, since our baseline year of 2009, waste has increased 18%. Our organizational waste, the waste that we generate, has been increased by just 1.7%, so slightly under 2%. But the public waste that we collect has increased to 85%. And so that's, we have a pretty good idea that it's an increase in homelessness and cleaning up illegal campsites on public lands, city-owned lands. And so that's an area that obviously touches into outside of city operations and how we address. It's not just putting recycling cans in public parks. It's about addressing houselessness issues and bigger issues that besides just the waste. So having these goals with targets, that it's been instrumental in helping us kind of prioritize our practices, and also just bringing sustainability into projects and that type of thing. when we report those things, it's the community has a better route to that information in areas that maybe a lot of organizations don't. I know that the four of us public institutions here, Sean and Brandon and Bailey, all do an annual form of reporting, which is great to see. I mean, more and more organizations are starting to do these types of things. But really, I mean, we just, as the city wants to set an example for the rest of the community and other communities in the region, we often tap in, the four of us often tap into each other for resources. And have you tried a project like this? What advice do you have? And so, you know, the more we can spread, you know, sustainable practices, the happier we are about that.
Awesome, thank you.
Mhm.
And one last question, has the pandemic shutdown impacted the city's footprint in any way or sustainability efforts?
Yeah, we, for us, we haven't as closely tracked energy use across our buildings as Brandon has. They've done an exceptional job in tracking per square footage and per user. We generally aggregate our data along energy use, and so the biggest place that we've noticed is in our waste, and just the waste that we collect from our own workers, and just the extra precautions. I expect to see that water use goes up in our facilities. I'm kind of curious to find out what is going to happen with energy, because there weren't significant changes in how our buildings were operated as far as heating and cooling during the pandemic, because we had, it's not like we have tidy workspaces in which to work. We have people kind of scattered here and there. And so that means lots of buildings to kind of maintain. You want people to be in their offices so they're physically distanced and are able to have the resources, which is the reason they're there in the first place, and not working remotely. And so I don't expect a big change on the energy side.
Thank you. I'm going to move to Sean, who is the Benton County Sustainability Coordinator. And same kind of question, Sean, what is the scope of the work that you do, and have you seen any progress with sustainability efforts?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, again, thank you so much for having us on. This is really cool. We also, Brandon alluded to it, a little old school. I've had sustainability on my business card for quite a number of years, and we really do take that broader definition. I really appreciate his comment. It's just not for tree huggers anymore. We're talking the economy, equity, environment, and we include livability. As we see more and more communities that become sustainable, they're fantastic, like Seattle and San Francisco, and you can't live there. And we too are in a little bit of a situation where affordability is a major issue. So these are kind of big, heady topics. More germane to the topic tonight of climate action and the climate crisis. Absolutely. To kind of counter what Scott was saying, we are just looking at our facilities, just Benton County governments. And so when we're looking at climate change, I should say one real quick thing. As far as our scope, we actually have 3 people where the commitment by not just our commissioners, but OSU and Corvallis and school district is just, it's wonderful. So I'm full-time, so I look at the big picture policy stuff. We have Jen Brown, who used to be at the Corvallis Environmental Center, who does just fantastic projects and making it actually happen. And then we have an internship program. I echo what Brandon said, to get students involved and to get real world experience, it's invaluable. And so we every year have an intern that is focusing on climate. So each of us have a little bit of a role in that stuff. So that's our program. Getting to climate crisis specifically, our commissioners, again, completely committed to this. So we've had 3 resolutions in just over 3 years. So the latest one was signed in February, which I think was like 7 or 8 years ago, or at least that's how it feels. So our new goal is we need to be half of our emissions, 2010 emissions by 2030 and net zero by 2050. So, and again, it's just ours. So what we track is our electricity, fleet and fuel, gas, water, and waste. And so what's been very nice is we can kind of hone in on just 2010 moving forward. So it's interesting about having smaller than OSU and Corvallis. So it's kind of challenging sometimes because it's just a little bit of tweaks can have a big difference on what we're experiencing. So from 2010, exactly as Brandon was saying, in the face of 100 new employees and bringing on 2 new facilities, our greenhouse gas per full-time employee actually decreased. Now we were on a nice little trend, and then we went up because of we purchased a handful of cars. What I'm saying is that for us, it's really challenging because just a little dab will do you. Our electricity went down 1.5, gas went down by 3.5, our water decreased 22.5%, and waste decreased by 1%, and we still went up because fleet and fuel and gasoline. So we're trying, every little thing really is challenging for us because we're so small, but that also gives us wide opportunities to find different ways of doing this. And as my compatriots know, I can go on for quite some time. So brevity is probably the best for evening, and I can answer questions moving forward. But I would like to ask the follow-up, if you don't mind, how COVID is affecting us.
Yes, that's what I was gonna ask.
I think I'm kind of with Scott. We our facilities, because there might be some people in there, and we don't have the day-to-day changing of the facility. I am also fascinated because we still have enough people in there, so the lights have to be on. What I'm interested in is if this thing right here, this camera that I'm pointing at, should be over at the Board of Commissioners office, and the plug load should be attributed to them. But now when they send everybody home, we're still emitting carbon, but it's just being allocated to something different. And so I'm curious. We do ours annually. I think Brandon, you do yours fiscally. So we do ours next January to start seeing, fleet. There are departments who 95% went down. We did Jen did a great analysis on the first 6 months from like September to March, and then March to now. There's no one's in the office, so they're not going from place to place. So some of our fleet is almost zero. Roads and parks, however, because of social distancing, we still need to do parks and we still need to do roads. They have to take separate vehicles so that you can't be in the same cab. So those are doubling. And so I think it's not necessarily across the board, like, okay, we're going to see a reduction. One, we're going to see increases in some and decreases in others. And like myself and so many of us were sent home, we're emitting carbon. It's just from our house as opposed to a government office. So yeah, I'm really fascinated to see how this works out, or even if we can capture any of that stuff. But we're still moving ahead. We're installing solar panels. We have at the health facility over by Chintimony, the new 4,500 building that we brought on board. We're planning to in the process of installing solar panels there. So we're doing our part, but it's going to be an interesting year.
Absolutely, thank you. I'm going to move to Bailey, who again is the Corvallis School District Sustainability Specialist. Same questions again, kind of what is the scope of your work at the school district, and have you seen any progress with sustainability goals?
Not a good time to step away.
Oh.
The one time I'm not talking.
Why don't I move ahead to Trish and then come back? Trish, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay. Hi. So you've been affiliated with 350 Corvallis, a climate kind of activist group. You've been a longtime activist, right, in Corvallis, and know a lot about Jordan Cove. So I was kind of wondering if you want to fill us in on that.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. And I'm not really sure how much to assume folks that are watching this program are familiar with the Jordan Cove proposed LNG terminal down in Coos Bay. The really quick snapshot is that there's a Canadian company Pembina Pipeline Corporation that wants to build a pipeline from Malin, Oregon, which is down by Lakeview, across the Cascade Mountains to Coos Bay, and sees lots of private property from landowners using eminent domain in the process. And then in Coos Bay, they want to build a terminal. Well, they will take the fracked gas that they bring in from Canada and chill it down to a very cold temperature, at which point it becomes liquid, and then they load it on tankers and, I mean, in theory, ship it off to foreign markets. Now, there's a whole conversation to be had about the fact that the COVID crisis has completely dropped the bottom out of the global LNG market. And LNG projects all over the planet are getting canceled every day. But in theory, that's what they think they're going to do. In order to do that, they need to get a significant number of permits from the federal government, as well as state agencies and some local permits from like the county, city and county planning departments. Where the project is right now is they have gotten approval from the federal government. That came out in March, I believe, or May. I'm losing track of the dates. Which, I mean, it surprised nobody because it's the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and they had been signaling, that they were probably going to approve it. The project, however, does not have any of its significant state permits, which include a clean water certificate, basically saying that they're able to build the pipeline and the terminal in such a way that it won't pollute Oregon waters. Well, the pipeline is supposed to cross well over 200 waterways alone. And the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality, in reviewing their application, kind of just said, no, you're not even close. And the applicant, Pembina, withdrew that permit. So they don't have a permit under the Clean Water Act. They're also missing a permit from the Department of State Lands, which is a fill removal permit, which is similar but separate for all of the activity where they would be disturbing waters of the state, including streams, rivers, and wetlands. And again, the Department of State Lands was getting ready to reject that permit. And literally at the 11th hour, the applicant withdrew it, which is a perfectly legal thing to do, but they don't have that permit either. And then there's another permit called the Coastal Zone Management Act that applies, and the state of Oregon. That one's really complicated because it kind of like bundles up all of the underlying permits and adds a few more. And the state of Oregon completely rejected that one. And they need to get permission from Department of Energy because they want to generate power on site, and they need to get permission from the state of Oregon to lease land that belongs to the state of Oregon for their pipeline. And they haven't gotten those permits either. So where the situation is now is the federal government approved everything. And theoretically, the federal government is the overriding agency on this project. However, they conditioned it saying, well, you can't really start construction until you have all of your state level permits. The applicant is challenging state of Oregon's authority on the clean water permit on a technicality, and I can go into deep in the weeds on that, but it was a bit of a baited switch, and it's really, really nasty. And at this point in time, everything has landed in the courts. The state of Oregon has sued the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And I don't know like what they're saying in their lawsuit, but they're just saying, because as far as things have gone now, the lawsuits that have been filed have just all said, we're suing because we think you made the wrong choice. And the actual arguments haven't been submitted. So I can't speak on behalf of the state of Oregon and say that I know what it is that they're saying. I mean, I could guess that they're saying that FERC should not have approved this because the environmental impact statement was inadequate. and didn't take into account all of the impacts on air, water, landowner rights. I mean, although I don't know if the state would get into that. Also, I mean, it's a pretty big deal for Governor Kate Brown to be suing the federal government. So I just, kind of want to let that, sink in, that it's a strong action that's being taken by the state to try to stop this. In addition, there are 3 different private lawsuits that have been filed. One is by the National Resources Defense Council, which is an environmental organization based in Washington, D.C., and I don't know anything about that lawsuit. Another one is by a coalition of organizations and private landowners that have been working together for many, many, many years to stop this project. And that the Sierra Club, the National Sierra Club, is the lead plaintiff on that, but there's a whole list of organizations, and that's getting into all of the ways that it doesn't meet the requirements of the National Environmental Policy Act, which it just doesn't. It's so flawed. It's hundreds when we submitted comments on the environmental impact statement, I think we submitted like 800 pages of comments of all. That's how much was wrong with it that we were able to identify. And then lastly, there's a lawsuit that's been filed by 2 native tribes, the Confederated Tribes. Oh gosh, I always have to look this up. Kuslower, Umpqua, and Sayusla, upon whose land the traditional territory, I should say, upon whose traditional territory the LNG terminal in Coos Bay is proposed to be built. And they have partnered with the Cow Creek Band of the Umpqua tribe, across whose traditional territory the pipeline is proposed to be routed. And again, I don't know what the basis of that lawsuit is, because everything that's been filed in the courts so far just say we're suing. But I strongly suspect, not speaking for the tribes, but based on correspondence that I have seen between the tribes and the federal government, that it will be based on the federal government not adequately taking into account the impact on cultural resources in the tribes' territories. So as far as the public goes, there's not a whole lot of public engagement at this point. The hearings are all over. We, let the state government and Governor Kate Brown and her agencies know that this is a terrible project and it shouldn't be built. And they responded and either rejected permits outright or were preparing to reject them, and they got pulled by the applicant. And now they're following up by challenging the federal government. And so this isn't going to get built anytime soon while it's tied up in the courts, we hope.
Good, thank you. I'm going to move to Jillian and then circle back to Bailey. Jillian, could you kind of describe what you do, what the focus of your study and work has been?
Sure. First, I just am thrilled to be here and hear all of your stories, and thank for that. Yeah, from OSU and everything we've done to everything everyone's doing. So it's a great town to be in. So thank you. So I am a climate change researcher. So I did decades worth of research looking at impacts, and after at some point I realized another scientific paper isn't what we need. We need action. And so I really felt compelled that I needed to help be part of getting the word out. And I was offered the opportunity to start a course on Introduction to Climate Change at Oregon State University to non-science majors. And I had actually been giving the similar students from that program tours of my climate change research and action projects. So they had come over and then they would want to volunteer, or they would come for extra credit first, and then they'd say, oh, but we want to stay and help more because this is so interesting. And then the next term they'd still be there, and I'd be like, but you're not getting credit for this. And they're like, that's okay. And like they would be, business majors, and just they were all really fascinated And so when I was offered the opportunity to give a course to that population, I was super excited. And that is what I have been focusing on at OSU. And we just start, a lot of people come, they're like, they hear in the news, really, is it warming? Is it a problem? Are humans responsible? Is it just variation? And we go through all of that so that they can slow down and look at the data themselves. It can be difficult when you hear different stories like, well, let's just go and look at the data and let's see what you guys think and let's talk about it. And so we go through different myths and we go through the science of, this is the science. It's really, it's been known. It was figured out in the 1800s. This is not a brand new thing. And so it's part of being in so OSU has this new program. It's called the Sustainability Double Degree. And so we have actually a lot of business majors in it because they want to go and be the chief sustainability officer in a business or something. So my class is part of this Sustainability Double Degree program. And if the students that come to our program, it's not just the classes that they get to take, but they also get to do a practicum experience. And we're trying to merge that. OSU also has this new carbon commitment committee, and I'm on that. And, we're like trying to get things done. But at the same time, I've got all these students and they're like, what can we do? We want to help. We want to do something. And so I'm at the point I'm trying to get them to merge into the practicum so that they can, engage with different researchers and different projects that we can use their energy to help get things done. So that's what I'm doing at OSU.
Awesome. Thank you. So kind of before the pandemic and the shutdowns, how in your view were we doing kind of globally, humans in terms of our footprint?
Okay. Well, okay. So it's an interesting thing. And I always like if I have a graph that I could show you at the same time, but in one level, it's really simple because temperature's going up, CO2 is going up, emissions going up. And so it's all going up. And, but people get the idea like, okay, well, it's been COVID and so we've been driving less. So maybe the actual CO2 concentration in the air is going to be going down because we're emitting less. And it's, there's a really big difference between what is in the air and what we emit. Oh, here, this works. So here's the CO2 that we're putting in the air. Now this is what's in the air and it's going up. And here's what we're adding and it's going up. And so as soon as the point comes when if we reduce a little bit of if we had no more CO2 that we add to the air at all, like not one drop for the whole year anywhere on Earth, then what would happen is that our CO2 would stay exactly at that level and it would just flatten off because we don't have any way to get that CO2 out of the air. So what we're talking about, what happened with COVID, is that what the International Energy Agency predicts, so initially in China, they said, oh, we had 25% less emissions in one of these months. But that was one country in the globe for 1 month. And so the International Energy Agency predicts that over the course of a year, our emissions will go down 8%. So that means that instead of emitting as much as we would, it'd be a little bit less. But we're still adding to what's in the atmosphere. So that what's in the atmosphere doesn't ever level off until we stop adding any CO2 at all. All right, that's what's going to make it flat. And then even once the CO2 is flat, our temperature still has a 30-year lag before all the positive feedback loops end. So like, for instance, it can get warmer, but it takes a while for all of that ice to melt. And so you can think of it like when you take a lasagna out of the oven, you want to cook it right away, but it's got to thaw first. So you can't, it's the same thing as we're warming the earth. It still takes time for all of the ice to melt, and there's this 30-year lag. So the first thing we need to do is stop emissions, and then that's just going to level off our CO2. And then we actually need to go into drawdown to get back to 350. Before we see a temperature. So we're going to have to, there's, we're seeing, well, we reduced our emissions and we want our, what's in the atmosphere to start going down. We have to go to 0 for it just to go flat. So.
Yeah.
And then so I'm kind of the doomsdayer of this all. Like we're listening, we're talking to everybody, and it was like, oh, we've gone down 12% and 30%, and like we have to be at 0 just to get the atmospheric CO2 to go flat, right? Because it's like a bathtub. If the more you have to, in order for the CO2 in the atmosphere to stop rising every year, you have to not add any at all. None.
Hard to swallow.
That's the goal. And so just because, so I'm not really, so the actual end goal is we need all of our electricity to be 100% renewable energy. And then once all of our electricity is 100% renewable energy, then we have to switch everything that we're running on natural gas over to electricity. And then at that point, that's when CO2 will just be flat. Okay. And then once that's flat, temperature still has 30 years before it levels off. And this is why it's a big deal. And this is why the IPCC says we've got to start now, and we have until 2030 to make these large, large changes. So I'm really glad we have this team all together to work on that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jillian. I'm going to move back to Bailey if Bailey's ready. So Bailey, you're the Corvallis School District Sustainability Specialist again. And same kind of questions. What's your scope of work with the school district, and have you seen any progress with sustainability efforts? Do we still have Bailey?
You need to unmute.
Now,
Oh.
Yes.
how am I doing?
I can hear you now.
I think just to reiterate, what Jillian just said, I mean, I have 2 kids, and, they're young kids, they're middle school and in an elementary school, age. And it's really hard. It's really hard to think about the future of, what they're going to have. And I think that everything that everyone has said, concerns anyone as a parent. So what I'm doing as a, employee of the district is I'm trying to work on all this. It's really hard. It's emotional. I imagine it is for all of you, So what I'm doing is just kind of working as much as I can on any of this. I think the district is doing a decent job. It's trying to make steps forward with efforts, and be that solar and so on and so forth. But it's hard right now. The district is really having a hard time knowing kind of what the next step is. So it's all sort of a, who knows?
Has the pandemic kind of influenced the sustainability efforts in any way, negative or positive?
I think it's made it harder, you know. You know, just with the efforts and yeah, it's I think the district is doing its best, and you know, it's going to end up being fine.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And I'm going to move back to Steve now, actually, for some audience questions.
Okay, you know, actually, just a little bit of moderator privilege, if I can. You know, I want to follow up with you specifically, Bailey. You talk about the position you're in being kind of emotionally difficult right now because you're seeing what's coming down the road for generations to come. Can you give me any kind of an example of that? Does one come to mind at almost 7:30 in the evening after a long day?
Well, I think it's hard, you know, for parents to be able to know, you know, kind of what the next step is. And the district is like giving very clear, like good messages on what that will look like, but it's, you know, it's hard, you know. As far as sustainability goes, we have a lot of great things to look forward to with the, you know, the solar panels and just the efforts that have been happening. So I think there's a lot of positivity here.
And then I guess, you know, kind of by way of follow-up, I would imagine that, do you ever see with parents that, do you have anything to do with the curriculum enough that if you have something to do with parents, that you see that politics goes into this in some negative way at the school district level, or has it been pretty well accepted by parents that there is some sustainability and environmental curriculum?
I think it's going well in that respect. You know, I don't think anyone's really looking for that at the moment. So I think what people are looking for right now is sustainability in their own lives, you know?
And then I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to move over to Scott and Sean for a moment. Questioner wants to know, well, it has a really multi-part question. Is saying that the numbers that the county and the city are using may be outdated, that there's numbers available for what we should be trying to achieve from the IPCC. First, what are our goals based on? Are we basing them on IPCC numbers of some kind? And why don't I leave the question there? I'll start with you, Scott, and then I'm gonna divide the question into parts. So Scott, yeah, you know, is our IPCC numbers something you're basing off of? And Scott, you're muted.
Thank you for that. Our climate action plan was adopted by City Council in late 2016. At that time, we based our long-term targets and goals on the state of Oregon's. They were pretty progressive. But they weren't the best. But it was, being a medium-sized city in the state of Oregon, we felt like that added some, connectivity to the state goals. And so it's a balancing act, and government is around pushing and pulling and what people will accept. And so partly there was some widely acceptance. There's more broad acceptance in the Oregon numbers that we hung our caps on. That's now almost, that document's now almost 4 years old, and it might need some refreshing here within the next few years. And those goals and targets will be, the targets will be updated, I'm sure, to coincide with well, not necessarily IPCC, but whatever standards that can get us at least further down the road. We know.
Is there a standard is there a standard currently applied now?
Well, there's a lot of different standards.
Right, but is there one particular that's being used now?
Well, if you look at Eugene's climate action plan, their goal is to reduce, according to IPCC.
Mm-hmm.
That was not achievable by, it's like a 85-90% reduction. I don't remember the exact numbers, by 2030 or something like that. And so the political or the actual feasibility of a project, of a document like that, seemed why put out a document that you know you're not going to achieve? But we understand that we want to strive for as much as we can. So
I'll move. Yeah, I think I've got it, and I'm going to go ahead and move over to Sean McGuire. If you would unmute Sean. Mm-hmm. And then, really the same question: is there a standard that is in place for the county that's issued by IPCC, or something else?
Actually, yes, spot on. So I mentioned, I'm sorry, I picked the wrong pandemic to have allergies. So back in, we had, as I said, 3 resolutions in just like 3 years. 2018 was, the commissioners had indicated, very much like Scott said, more on the Kyoto Protocol, going back to 1990, and it was the same one as the states in Corvallis, and that was the rationale. Why don't we all go to the same goal? When IPCC came out, per Jillian's comments about we need to take action now, I have to say, as a government, it wasn't as like, okay, here's the goal here. Kind of had to read through it. The foundational was to be net zero by 2050 and make considerable action by 2030. There really wasn't a bam. That's why we kind of crafted ours. As I made, our goal is half of 2010 emissions by 2030, net zero by 2050, and that was predicated on the IPCC and more current research. So to specifically answer your question, that was the basis of the commissioner's decision. And again, they are committed to this, and again, pre-COVID and even during COVID, we're doing everything we possibly can to achieve that. And I get into the details if you want, but I also don't want to take up too much time.
Right, and then what I want to do is then get to this particular viewer's second part of her question. Is there somewhere handy, like on a city website, county website, where folks can grab what the goal is and what the current progress is? And Sean, let me have you continue for a moment on that, and then I will move to you after that, Scott.
Go to co.benton.or.us, which are Google Benton County, Oregon, because there's a Benton County, Washington. And just there's a little search, just type in greenhouse gas. We have all 3 resolutions, the annual report, which Scott did a great annual report, Scott, like of all those. We have that included in the PowerPoint. So the information is there, and we are in the process of reorganizing our website for several different reasons. But in the coming weeks, we're going to have each section that Scott has on its own. But right now, just go to our home site, Google or search for greenhouse gas, and all that information is in one sheet or one.
Great, thanks so much, Scott. What about over at the city?
Yeah, the city, you can do the same thing. Google City of Corvallis Climate Action Plan, and you'll see that document. There are some supplemental materials that you'll see my name that you can email me for if you want to see specific actions that have been laid out. But yeah, you'll see 2020, 2035, and 2050 targets of 2050, it's 75% reduction from 1990 levels.
And then I'm going to move to Trish Weber for a minute. And, you know, this one is kind of interesting because you and I believe, may have discussed it, except I think we were preparing for something else. I honestly don't remember. But aren't projects like Jordan Cove almost going to get eliminated by the market at some point? Is really what this question amounts to. Let me leave it there and see if do you think you can answer it the way that I just stated it. I'm working through yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, the short answer is projects like Jordan Cove are getting eliminated by the market right now. If you are a geek about these sort of things and follow the media around energy markets, it's like a couple times a week news is coming out of an LNG terminal being canceled somewhere on the planet. And there's a lot of factors to that. I mean, there was a glut before COVID hit, and now COVID has driven the cost of fracked gas so low that LNG just doesn't pencil out. How long will Pembina hang in is a whole nother question, right? Like the individual, the general always breaks down with the specific. So, the economics are very, very, very bad for LNG right now. They just are. And what Pembina is negotiating with its investors, I mean, they have a line of credit from JP Morgan Chase, and their 5 largest bankers are 4 Canadian banks and then JP Morgan Chase. And Pembina is kind of an interesting company in that they're Canadian, and what they do is they are strictly a middle carrier at this point, which means they take fracked gas from British Columbia and they convert it into this nasty liquid called diluent, and they ship it over to Alberta to the tar sands. And the diluent mixes with the bitumen that comes out of the ground and makes it liquid enough to flow in pipelines if you put it under high pressure. And I don't know, the Keystone XL pipeline is a tar sands pipeline they're trying to get built. Economically, the tar sands are in worse shape than LNG is globally. So when Pembina bought the Jordan Cove project, my strong suspicion, based on nothing but what I know about global markets and the tar sands, is that they were looking for a way to get out of the tar sands, because the handwriting's on the wall that the tar sands are in a death spiral, which is good. I mean, it's good for the planet. So again, I don't know how to answer your question because I'm not inside of the heads of the Pembina executives. Because they're a middle carrier, they are in a little bit better shape financially than some of the producers and the upstream or the downstream, because they're right in the middle, and the way their contracts are set up, they get paid first. So on paper, they look better than a lot of the other companies, in the fossil fuel, the oil and gas industry. How long that can last with the tar sands not being well, I don't know. So that's like a whole lot of information and not anything really very definite. But you're absolutely right. It's looking worse and worse every day for this project economically.
And then I'm going to ask Jillian to dovetail with that.
Oh, okay.
So Jillian, hopefully you're unmuted. So, my question is really, I think we've discussed this before. Um, the economics of wind and solar relative to other means of energy production, that has changed. Can you unwrap that for our viewers just a little bit?
Yeah, my understanding at this point is if there was not already the infrastructure in place, we didn't already have the coal power plants, and you just wanted to create energy from scratch, it's currently cheaper to start from scratch with wind and solar to use fossil fuels. So that game is over. The only reason we're still using it is that the infrastructure is in place. Okay. So if you're starting from scratch, it's cheaper to do wind or solar now. That's we've crossed that line and we're there.
How long has it been like that?
I have just been saying that for the last year. So
Really?
I don't know if I was slow in getting the story or Brandon was shaking his head.
Yeah.
It's just been in the last year that we crossed that line.
Yeah, I was surprised to hear it. And then,
Yeah.
I'm going to skip ahead to somebody else's question because it dovetails well with this. And anybody of our panelists that want to break in, I want to welcome you that you can whenever you'd like. But I'll again direct this to Jillian. What's the role of nuclear power in all of this?
Well, here we are in Corvallis and we've got NuScale, and I wish I knew the exact details, but they do say that their systems are quite safe. They're a whole smaller scale. And I guess the idea is that you could be a rural town that doesn't need an enormous amount of energy, and you don't want to have pipelines coming there, and maybe it's depending on the safety. I'm not a NuScale representative, but they are not adding carbon to the air. And we absolutely cannot be adding carbon to the air. And they are coming up with a product that is small scale, that is like individual towns could have their own small scale one. And that as they need more, they can get more and more units. And I find it fascinating. And it might
it's interesting technology. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I guess from this, how does it compare? If you're a small town, you're an executive in a small town, you're needing to make decisions about growing needs. If you're looking at wind, solar, nuke, probably some of this depends on your geography. But in relative terms, how does wind or solar do compared to nuclear in terms of cost and economics for a community?
Yeah, I don't have right now. I think nuclear is still going to be quite a bit more expensive, and it's also not renewable. So uranium is something we take out of the ground that's a limited supply. So that's
Right.
also will not last forever. The whole idea with renewable energy is, so long as the sun is shining, we can just harness that energy. So long as the wind is blowing, the earth is spinning, we're going to have that. The problem is the intermittency of the sun and the wind. And so actually, I did kind of want to retract about this any drop that we add to atmosphere. But Sean was talking about net zero. Because it is true, we want to have net zero emissions does mean, like, of all the CO2 we put in the atmosphere, approximately half of that is taken up by our healthy ecosystems. So long as we can turn things around in the time that we have healthy forests and healthy oceans, and that are taking literally half of all the CO2 that we put in the air, our healthy ecosystems are taking out for us. So we don't necessarily have to put the zero into air. We do, but we want to get to net zero is the goal. And
I think this questioner probably has in mind what's practical.
What's practical?
Is nuclear practical if you're deciding on an energy mix for your community?
Today, no. today it's still too expensive. Today, NeilSkill, they're hoping to have some things maybe available in 2025. Today, solar. Solar is cheap. And if you don't have wind, you put up solar, and you have to have backup. Everything is net metering. And so you still would have your electric, when the sun isn't shining, you still be buying from your energy source.
Right, okay.
Oh, I'd love Steve to jump in on the nuclear
Yeah, please.
for a second, if you don't mind. I am not specifically qualified to talk about this, so let me just put that caveat out. But I'm one of the co-organizers of the Washington and Oregon Higher Education Sustainability Conference. Mm-hmm. And we very intentionally created a session this past March, early March, luckily. We could still pull off the conference in Eugene, that brought in experts from around the nation, from Princeton, Berkeley, and our own NewScale here in Corvallis, to talk about the nuances and challenges of nuclear energy. And just want to back up what Jillian said with a couple of sound bites, I guess. There's two key words to the nuclear equation, and that is base load. In that, as Jillian said, when the sun doesn't shine and the wind doesn't blow, you still need something there. And so the grid is not this mysterious creature that just lights itself up without inputs. Right now, the base load is mostly fossil fuel and some hydro here in the Northwest, but not nearly enough to meet our national demand. So that base load has to come from a constant energy source. And in my mind, until we have wave power, which is another form of renewable energy brought online in 10 years or so, nuclear has a very definitive role to play as a bridge fuel. And then that's the second of those two terms. I call it a bridge fuel because it is temporary. It's not renewable, but it has a very low carbon footprint compared to our grid profile today. That, if we're serious about base load, the tools at our disposal today, and if we're serious about reducing carbon emissions, nuclear absolutely must play a role, whether you like it or not. That's the reality of our fossil fuel infrastructure today. NewScale, I'm not here to advocate for them, but I think they have something that, whether it's their modular reactor or another modular reactor that can be produced and contained safely, that combined with policy changes to allow for reprocessing of what we now consider in the US spent fuel. If you do much research on this, we have a sort of insane approach to nuclear waste, in that we produce a lot of it because we're so afraid of processing it down from energy creating fuel to weapons creating fuel. And if that can be overcome, there's a lot more energy to be tapped in the nuclear spectrum. So I think there really is a role for it to play in the short run, but probably not in the long run. Looking 100 years from now, we better be looking to solar and wave and storage. The other part of that equation is storage. We can build all the wind farms and solar farms we want, but we also have to store it somehow. And until we have a base load or a base, something that can provide base load needs, lithium-ion batteries and other batteries have their own baggage that comes with them. Lithium mining is incredibly damaging in the areas where it's done. So there's not a silver bullet solution, but there's a portfolio of solutions that I think includes nuclear.
And then I'm going to circle back to Jillian for a moment. And then I think you've given me some global number at some point for what carbon emission reduction had been over the course of the pandemic, or what we're anticipating for the year. What was that number again?
For the year, the IEA is projecting 8%.
8%. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know why I thought I heard 5, but that's why I asked, because I knew I might have forgotten. And then, so 8%, and it takes a while for that 8% reduction to show up in terms of effect on climate, yes?
Well, if you think of the amount of CO2 in the air is like filling up your beer mug. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you've got so much, and you're still adding, And so even if you have 8% less that you're adding, you're still adding to it. So the actual amount of beer that you have is still going up.
And so the reason I asked this, and I'm going to ask everybody on the panel, is we have a questioner that is, well, boy, I'm almost afraid to, but here we go. And it's a pretty basic one. What can we expect over the next 20 years? Because, yeah, a reduction takes time. It takes longer for it to show up. Who wants to start?
I'll jump in here. I work with kids, and I would say absolutely we have a lot of reason to be positive about this. And it's hard right now. Yeah, it's a hard topic. It's hard. My kids ask me about it. I think it's something that we can achieve, and I feel positive about it.
Right, but now, is there some sort of global impact that you see, or an impact here in Corvallis that you see, that you think we don't see today that we're gonna be dealing with in 20 years?
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah. And then let me move to Jillian. I'll go ahead and I'll move to you, and then I'm going to move around the rest of the panel.
Oh.
Jillian. Yeah.
Okay, so you want to know what I see for the future?
Yeah. What do you see for the future?
We're doing it, man.
Irreversible? I guess what they're really asking.
Carbon neutral by 2030, and yeah, it's within the range.
Okay.
Cheap, wind's cheap, we're motivated, impacts are around the corner, and we just, in my opinion, people were saying, well, in order to make a change, we've got to have this Green New Deal. And everyone's like, well, that's a pipe dream. Like, you got to have $2 trillion to make that happen. Well, so here we are, and we're spending $7 trillion. And so, well, that's great. So those trillions of dollars have happened, and they're out there and they're being spent. So we just need to allocate those trillions of dollars to the energy transition, and we're going to be in good shape. So that's
right. And then,
I don't see any other option.
And then, is there anybody else has anything else to add? Because I want to get to a few more of these questions if I can. We're starting to run low on time.
Actually,
yeah, please.
I don't know what's going to go on in 20 years, but I know what's going on in the last 4 months. This is a tragedy, both COVID and this social and racial conflagration that is going worldwide. And it's tragic, but it's also an opportunity. You start hearing these things, and I don't know what these big things. There's so much uncertainty, like just so much global uncertainty. But the one thing is that everything that we thought of that was impossible in a single weekend is possible. And one very specific, I know my other three brethren are tired of me saying this, but I've been in government for 20, 25 years. The whole concept of teleworking, telecommuting, you're just going to sit there and watch ESPN and goof off all day. No one's going to work. Dogs and cats going to come flying out from the sky. Just total chaos. That's just I was openly laughed at, not just here, not just when I worked for the Oregon State or Maryland State, wherever. It's just across the board. It was literally laughable on March 11th. On March 13th, I was kicked out of my office and told to start teleworking. And by that Monday, the county had a policy. I mean, that's how fast this is happening. And if we can just have that open space, policymakers, our own self, how we get around. Other friends of mine know that there are certain places I'd like to visit on a daily basis. Well, if I can't go there, what other kind of things can I do? How much social can I be? We have just opened up. I don't know if we've made enough bread as an entire world in these past 5 months, but it has just been an explosion of a mindset of all these precursors that we thought were absolutely a given exploded in a weekend. And if we can somehow keep that going and to critically analyze as we go, and whether we're not even out of the first wave, second wave, the next pandemic, the earthquake, fires, brimstone. I mean, I don't mean to be too negative, but this really is an opportunity, and we're seeing a lot of communities taking advantage of
And what
it.
you're saying is there were so many naysayers, people who said we can't do an X and a Y and a Z, and all of a sudden it turns out your government can move fast as all get out, and break things and clean up later.
To me, this matters. It matters about a sense of community. When the vandalism happened in Corvallis a couple weeks ago, no one set out anything. I mean, yes, I don't know the specifics, and I hope this person broke the law, but if he needed treatment, then so be it, or whatever the situation was.
Right.
$21,000 were raised on GoFund in a couple of days to support the local businesses. That's my idea of a community. That's why I like living here. And if some of those things, whether they're organic or official policy or whatever that is, collaboration, integration, the fact that we work all so closely together, just taking advantage of those in a mindset that everything is possible.
Now, on the other hand, you saw last year during the legislative session, in this last year, a considerable amount of the state legislature walked out over carbon emission tax. And you wound up with a blunt instrument, which is executive orders. How do, I guess on the other hand, you kind of have to measure that negativity still occurs. What do you have to say to that? It's almost like you just, you just keep fighting best you can, or.
As someone who worked for the state for 20 plus years, it's difficult because you're at that mindset of, if we can go back a little bit and just stay with me, I'm a policy analyst and economist by trade. So when we were talking about nuclear, very similar to hydro, where I'm from, it wasn't because of the impact of fish. Some areas it does. It starts opening up, like you're thinking about the different angles, as opposed to, again, if it's a famous thing, a politician just wants a one-handed analyst, because you keep saying, well, on the other hand, just tell me what I want to do. Life isn't that easy. It's all these trade-offs. And so when you're in these meetings and you're talking about these, you can kind of fall down the rabbit hole of policy and all these other implications. Here, especially local government, is my first local government real job. I go talk to someone. I'm right here. There's a connection that's inherent that we're all in this together. Corvallis, Monroe, the county, the region. I think it's not easier, but it's a little bit more impactful and in your face than talking about these big and I'm not even talking about the feds, because that's another conversation. So
okay, I'm gonna actually move through here pretty quickly now. We have about 3 to 4 minutes of useful question time left. So rather than have whole panel answer these, I'll probably move around just a little bit. Jillian, if there were 2 or 3 things somebody could do each day practically to have an impact, what would that look like in, 30 seconds?
I teach students, so students don't have homes. The first thing would be to go solar, so that you can have net zero electric at your own home. If you don't have a home, reducing your meat intake is the single easiest thing. That doesn't mean you have to stop eating any meat or dairy, but you certainly don't need meat breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day. So reducing your intake is going to have the most immediate, largest impact. But in general, going solar yourself, having your friends go solar, and then once you are solar, getting off your fossil fuels so that you can use your renewable solar to be running your whole home.
That and meat reduction. Yes. Okay, great.
People can do that.
Then Trish? Then I'm going to go Trish, and then I'm going to go Bailey, and then I'll go then I'll go from there. So Trish, give me 1 or 2 things that somebody could do today to help reduce carbon footprint.
Oh boy, that's a tough one for me, because my area of experience is like totally in stopping fossil fuel infrastructure from being built. But I would say number one is register to vote because elections matter.
I like you. Thank you. Okay. We deal with interns all the time come in at the Advocate, and they have to learn that how important that is. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to move to Brandon. And if you'll unmute, Brandon.
Yeah, in addition to the things that have been mentioned already, we have talked about how our systems can move quickly and systemically if they perceive a crisis. Our social systems, including the government, do not perceive climate as a crisis. And so the one thing I would say is talking to elected officials at all levels to advocate for the perception that this is in fact a climate crisis. We have a ton of tools at our disposal. We've talked about nuclear. We didn't talk much about carbon tax, but that's one we could employ relatively quickly, and it could be simply too. So that would be my pick.
Bailey, and then I'll go to Scott and Sean. Bailey.
I just kind of echo what they've said. I think student learning opportunities around all these topics are what's needed because they're going to be the ones going forward. And so I think that the kids need to feel empowered. And if I can help get them to that position, that's what I want to do. And I think what all the panelists have been talking about is exactly right.
Okay, and then Scott and then Sean, please. Oh, Scott, you'll need to unmute.
It's not like a regular conversation. I always forget to unmute. Yeah, great ideas out there. Shifting your transportation to off of fossil fuels is a big way to do that, especially as you move your electricity to renewable electricity. And so maybe it's not a different car, but maybe it's a bike or walking or alternative transportation like the bus. City of Corvallis is committed to using 50% renewable diesel this year in our city operations. So that includes all the transit buses, which has a big reduction in our carbon emissions. Also burns cleaner locally, which is a side benefit. There's a lot of good ideas out there. Involved in your local elections and talking to your community member or your counselors about those issues that are important. Things like the Corvallis plastic bag ban. It was a community effort. It happened through city council, dedicated folks willing to work together and push an issue.
Great. Okay, then Sean.
Two things. One is having a perspective as we're talking about, every little thing matters. Sometimes it gets so amorphous, so I'm just some person in this very small that my actions don't matter. They do, every little thing. Less meet, bike to work, you shop local, all of those things matter on a day-to-day basis. They really honestly do. You do have an impact. And second, as a policy analyst, again, go vote because those decisions are being made over the next 2, 4, 6 years. And the bottom line are budgets, and budgets are moral documents. And you don't make a decision on those unless you're in the room or you vote for those things. So not to sound like a broken record, but that's where I'm from.
And then, that's where I was going to do this. I'll get one last one, and I'm only going to give you about a minute each, and then we'll have to wrap up. I'm going to go to both Scott and to Sean. The question is, there's been discussion that Corvallis and this area in general will become a place for climate refugees in the future. One, is that the way city and county sees it? And are there preparations underway to anticipate what that will look like? Scott, I hate to do this to you, but about a minute and a half.
Well, fortunately, I don't have much to say about this because this is not my area of expertise too much. I know our senior staff, elected leaders do understand that this is a climate refuge location. And there are measures around resiliency and planning developments, I can't say are in the works, but there has been a strong push from our leadership to endorse improved building codes, let's say, and for the state of Oregon to include things like solar-ready construction. There are our mayor was assignee to a letter to Governor Brown, and urging her to, with I think about 7 or 8 other large communities in Oregon, to push those types of measures. And so that's about the depth of where I can go on that topic.
Okay, great. And then I'll move to you, Sean.
90 seconds, time me, Brandon. So actually, this was that exact fact. Yes, and the Pacific Northwest is going to be the only influx. The PSU estimates that another 20,000 people will be moving here before 2040, which actually was the whole catalyst for when I came on board. It was to go out to the public to get to identify and talk to our whole county to identify what these core values are: transportation, carrying capacity, all equity, housing, affordability, all of these, and how we're going to deal with not just, I love it, as Jillian said, it's not just where we are, but add on 20,000 people, because we don't have any housing problem here, said no one ever. So how are these going to be exacerbated, and how are we going to prepare ourselves at a high level? That is exactly what we're doing in our case with 2040 Thriving Communities, Scott and Corvallis with their ICANN 2040. So there are planning in the work in the upper level. The challenge is that we just have to start looking at that every single time there's a planning exercise or transportation exercise or housing. How is this?
Is there any documentation online available to the public?
Benton2040.org.
Perfect. Okay. I've got to tell you, as panels go, it's you folks, there's just such a wealth of information. I could do this another 2 hours, but then you'd all want to not ever appear with us again. I do want to remind our viewers of a couple of things, and then also inform our viewers of something. Later this week will come a special multi-part, multi-day report from us on local policing. So you'll want to look for that on our website. And then along with that, next week, we have a panel that has to do with public health. Really 2 things: public health, and then your own health at home, mentally speaking, being shut in and during a pandemic and all the uncertainty and all of the news in a thrush every day. We have Janice Svoboda that will be here. She is a licensed clinical social worker. And then we will also have the co-directors of the Benton County Health Department, Danielle Brown and Charlie Fountain, as well. We'll be talking about the pandemic and mental health, and then also physical health. Charlie has a medical background and is following the epidemiology that is going on throughout the state and our community. Other than that, if you are not a subscriber and you have consumed this content, please consider being a subscriber. Thank you. And Stevie, thank you all for being willing to speak with us.
Thank you.
It's been a wonderful panel. Stevie, I would like to turn it back to you.
All right. Thanks, Steve. And yeah, thank you all to all of our panelists that have been here tonight. Really appreciate you taking the time out of your schedules to talk with us in the community. And another shout out to the Corvallis Advocate staff out there putting in all the good work, and our supporters for this event, and to our viewers. And with that all said, this panel is concluded, and good night.